Hello and welcome to the 500 workshop. Today we're going to be looking at engine removal on our 500L. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it is achievable if you follow the steps that I'm going to show you today. To try and make the engine removal as simple as possible, I've put together a checklist so we can check the things as we go. Now, I've tried to do it in order, but I already know that there's one piece that needs to come up the list slightly. So we have, because we're going to be working on the engine, we want to disconnect the battery. We then actually, there's one down here which is remove the exhaust shield and undercar tin wear, so we're going to do, that's the second job, and then we're going to follow these through. So remove the bumper and chrome, going to disconnect the electrics. I put in there take pictures. It's worth taking pictures before you disconnect the electrics so you can look back at those pictures and remember exactly where each cable went in case you're not familiar with them. We're going to remove the starter out the way. We're going to disconnect the hoses, disconnect the fuel lines and make that safe because you don't want fuel going everywhere. We're going to disconnect the throttle and the choke. We're going to remove the rear mount and cross member and use a jack then to support the engine. We're going to then remove the gearbox bolts and I'll show you where they are. We'll do some final checks to make sure nothing else is in the way and I haven't forgotten anything, and if there is anything I've forgotten I'll add it to the list as I go to make sure we got it. This is what I can remember from doing this previously, and then we'll actually remove the engine. Now, I've already jacked up the car and I've already removed the boot lid. There are two videos which I've shown you previously how to do those things, so if you're unsure how to do those before you start, please take a look at those videos first. So the first thing we're going to do is make our battery safe, because we are removing some electrical cables, but also we'll be removing the starter, and it's quite easy to short out the starter if you don't do this. So this is our battery in the front, under the front bonnet, at the front left, and all we're going to do, this particular one is using a 10mm, and all we're going to do is do the negative cable and just remove that and push it to one side so the battery is no longer grounded and can't supply power. So our next job is to remove the chrome bumper here. So this particular model has got the nudge bars on because it's an L, and if we go under the car a moment, you'll see that it's connected here. I believe that's a 13 or 15, we'll check in a moment, and it's just connected, the nudge bar is also connected just near the exhaust here. On the other side, very similar. So here it's connected, and also just behind the front wheel here. And then the actual bumper itself, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to actually see all the way in, oh we can, there, is actually bolted through the rear cross member. So once we've got those nudge bars loose, we'll loosen the bolts that holds the bumper in all together. You need to be careful, because what you don't want to do as you remove it is for the bumper to scratch the paintwork around these areas, so or the nudge bars to do that. So either put a cloth over the top of those, or just be really careful, so you put cloth over both sides, or just be very careful as you remove it to not have any damage. These middle bits of the bracket, as you undo them, will become very loose and have a tendency to fall out. So just make sure as you're pulling it off that you have hold of those and they don't go and damage any of the paintwork as well. Okay, so we're going to do that now. So the nudge bars are indeed a 13mm, so I've got 13mm socket, ratchet, and I'm going to start on this side. Just need to be careful that the cone doesn't kind of pop off. Sometimes because they might not sit perfectly, they can distort a little bit, and then as you undo them, kind of ping. Oh, there you go. So that one did ping at the very end there, just under the tension and load. Need to be a bit careful here. Don't want that to damage anything, so we'll just leave it like that for a minute. Come over this side and do the same. There's one. And two. And I've got some of these boxes, just stackable kind of containers that I like to put my pieces in from the bolts and stuff, just so I know what they are and where they came from in the car, so I don't forget, and I can put those to one side. It saves you hunting around for those pieces later. So now we're going to turn our attention to inside of here, inside the rear cross member. Just find our bolts. Here's one. That one's undoing. So need to be careful. I'm not going to undo it all the way. I'm just going to leave it there just in case it starts to drop off when I undo this side. I'm going to put my knee against it just to keep some strength behind it. I'll get the washer. There we go, got it. Finally. See, need to be careful. Those brackets did exactly what I thought they might do and just fell away. Can't get the washer right now, so I'll get that in a second. It can be worth putting some, like a soft cloth down, because you don't want to damage the chrome. But we're going to put this bumper to one side for now. Come back to it later. Now our next job that was on the list, which was a bit further down, but I mentioned that we need to bring it up the list, is to remove the tin wear that's holding, would stop us taking the engine out. Now there's this one in front of the sump and goes round and underneath the fan housing. This has a number of kind of points. I think there's 3 along the back here, and I believe there's 2 more right underneath. Let's see if we can show those. So there's one, I think there you can see, but the other one is right round the back. So we'll have to go under the car to remove those. And then also the exhaust heat shield here we need to take off. They look like 13s, I think. So we'll do that, and whilst we're doing that, we'll just remove also this earth cable here. So find the easiest way to get the nuts and bolts off of the plate underneath the car is to use 2 7mm sockets with ratchets. So putting one over the top to hold the nut in place, and then the other one underneath. And you can start undoing those quite quickly. Due to the holes in this actual plate, which when I originally bought the car didn't have a plate here, so, and I know it's there to aid cooling, so I bought one, but the holes are massive, so I've had to use quite a lot of kind of washers to get it to hold in place. Just realised I've still got these rubber grommets on there, so I'm just going to remove those. So, next one along. Okay. Once the plate's out the way, I can get the nut easier from the bottom here, or I can use a magnet to get that out. So final one along this side. So you might have an original plate or original fixings. Just probably need to find the right socket set or the right screwdriver in order to do it. Tight, there we go. Now I'm going to go, actually I'm going to quickly get a magnet just to get the nuts out. So just got an extended magnet that I can just put down here and pick up the nut and washer and put it in one of my trays to keep safe. Oh. Just lost one of my nuts, but that will come out when we take the bottom off. Now I'm going to have to get under the car to do the others. And that's by far the hardest and least enjoyable job of removing the engine. But now we've got there, and we can see the piece of tinware that was under the car. So again, I'm going to put that to one side and continue. Now I've got the exhaust shield. Got the wrong size there. It's a 10. So 10 socket. I can just quite easily remove these. So that's the first one. and the second one, and we removed that side plate. Okay, so far we've disconnected the battery, we've removed the bumper and chrome, and we've removed the exhaust shield and under the car tinware. We're now on to disconnecting the electrics. So if you haven't already done so, first thing you want to do is remove the grounding cable from wherever it's mounted. So that's removed and unattached. You then want to, as I mentioned before, take pictures. And what you want to do is take pictures, and depending on where your coil is, take a picture of the coil, because you're going to be removing the electrics from that. You're going to be removing the electrics from the oil pressure gauge, and you're going to be removing the electrics from your alternator or dynamo. So first thing we're going to do is take some pictures. So on our car, the coil is behind the rear light here on this L. If you've got an F or other models, it might be around the back here or at the very back there. So make sure you get in, take a picture, just understand what cables are where and which colour cables are going where. We can take a picture, if you want to, of the oil pressure gauge, in case you're not sure what the oil pressure gauge looks like. Hopefully we can see that on that picture. So it's down behind the distributor. There's your oil pressure gauge, and then we're just going to take a picture of the wires, and this is an alternator on this car because this is the 650cc from 126. So we can then start removing them. I've got a brown cable here which is just a pull removal, so that's out the way. And then it looks like these two are 10, so just going to get our 10 ratchet, put it in here. Yep, swing. Don't necessarily have to understand how all these things work. It's just about removing them in order, but making sure you understand where they went so you can put them back on in the right order. I'm just going to taking the nut off, but I'm just going to screw it slightly back on with the cable off so I don't lose that nut. Just got a bit stiff towards the end here. There we go, so remove the cable. Again, I'm going to slip that nut back on so I don't lose it. And just do this one a little bit tighter. Got the, going to just pull the distributor cable straight out of the coil. Let's just bring the camera round slightly. You might be able to get a slightly better view of the coil there. So the coil's got a positive and negative terminal on that. I think these are an 8mm. Yes, they are. So pull the distributor cable. If it's over to the left hand side, it'll be a long distributor cable, but this is quite a short one, so we can remove that. And then we can, the distributor is connected to the coil. In this case we have an electronic distributor, so it's taking its feed of power directly from the coil terminals. Just put that back on so we don't again lose that nut. There's negative and positive remove, and then finally come back round here. Might not be able to see this too clearly because it's right in the depths of the engine, but with the oil pressure sensor we're just going to pull back. There's a sheath that goes around it, just going to pull that back and then pull the electrical cable out of it, and that's disconnected. So that should now be all of our electrics disconnected. So our next job is to remove the starter motor. Now, the starter motor can be different positions slightly depending on which engine you have. On the 650 cc, it is on the right hand side. Let's see if we can show you a little bit. Where are we? So can you see my hand? Yep, it's down here where you can just about see my hand. You can see the electrics on the starter motor here. On other models, so 499cc and earlier models, it tends to be higher up, kind of behind the head of the engine. But on this particular one, there's 3 bolts holding it in, and we'll go and show you where they will be. So over here we have a spare gearbox, and I'm going to use this to demonstrate where we need to undo bolts. So this is where the starter motor goes, and in order to remove the starter motor, there's a bolt at the top here that goes in this way, and we need to remove it from behind the engine, but you do that from within the actual engine bay itself. There's one here which again you remove through the engine bay, but that's a nut that sits on this side. We then have a bolt here which you have to remove from this side, and that's from under the car. That's the only way to remove that one, from under the car. Sorry, my camera's not quite on it. From under the car here. We also have an engine bolt here at the bottom, and that has to be removed from under the car as well. So while you're taking out this starter motor bolt, it's worth taking off this bolt as well. Don't worry, there's still enough bolts to hold the engine in, so you don't need to be too worried while you're doing that. All we're actually going to do is remove the starter motor and put it to one side. We're not actually going to disconnect it entirely. It's not going to take all the electrics and cabling off and stuff, so we just want it to be removed so we can remove the engine. We then have another 4 bolts coming through, so we've got one here, one at the top, one here, and one down here. Now definitely these 3 I know at the top here can be removed from the top of the engine. I can't remember whether you have to be under the car for this one or not. I think possibly you do, but we'll check that as we go. So 5 bolts holding in the engine on their own, and then another 3 connected here to the starter motor into the engine block as well. So that's where we need to tackle next. So the first one is here. I've already started to crack it open, but we're going to take that off all the way. And while we're under here as well, And I just realised that there was another job that we needed to do, which was actually, do we? Yeah, we do. I think we need to take this bit of tinware off under here as well that protects the flywheel and the clutch. But also, while we're under here, there is an engine bolt mounting just here, which I'll show you on the gearbox that we've got in a moment, and I'll just remove that while I'm here as well. Saves coming back under, and there's plenty of other bolts holding it in, so I'm not worried about that. Oh, so we'll remove that, and then we'll remove this plate as well, which is 10mm. So we'll just go and find that. Can you see the plate in the picture? Possibly not. See if we can show you this plate. There's the plate here, just here, that we need to remove. So we just so we removed the bolt here, sorry, the nut here and the bolt here, and now we're just going to remove this plate. I'm just going to take this off. Drop the ratchet on my face, so just remove that, and there we go. So we'll remove that bit of tinware, take all our bolts and washers, and move to the upper side of the engine. So we're back in the engine bay, and we've unbolted one of our starter motor bolts. And I'll just move this out of the way, try and get in and here and see if we can see the others. Might be a bit tricky, there might not be quite enough light, but let's see if I can see my hand. Yep, okay, so the one bolt is down here, and we can unscrew that, and then the other, which you can't see, you have to feel for, is behind the exhaust at the back here. So you can feel for a nut, an actual bolt, and we'll unscrew that. So we're back with our 13. I'm going to go into the engine bay and try and break this nut off. Okay, so although I said it was a bolt on the front of the engine block, and it is, but you can't get a ratchet over that 13 bolt nut, sorry. So you have to go in from behind actually, and the nut seems to be now coming off, and you're actually undoing the bolt from behind. It's impossible to get something over the nut. You might be able to get a spanner on it, but it's a bit difficult, so having to work my hand on one side and the ratchet on the other. I can feel it all coming nicely out. Very end here. Right, there we go. I'll push out the bolt from behind. Okay, so here's the bolt and the nut. I just put that back together because you want to keep those together when you put them back in. And finally, for the starter motor, actually it looks like it's a nut on the back here into a screw thread. So we're just going to quickly ratchet that off. And it's now, starter motors, now that nut's off, is actually just hanging off that bolt or thread within the engine block. So literally we should just be able to pull it loose. There we go. And we're just going to lay it carefully on the suspension arm and just try and tuck it away so that we don't foul it or have a problem when we remove the engine later. I just need to take a look at that from underneath, but that's off, so no longer connected now to the engine anyway. So our next job is a really easy one. It's just removing the hoses. So you've got the big air hose on this side of the engine and you've got the conveyor hose on this side of the engine feeding warm air into your car. I think some people might have this Jubilee clipped. I don't. Literally all I have to do is pull the hose, it just pops off, and you're pulling it from the engine side, not from the car side. So with this one, just put your hand down the back of the engine and just pull that hose off, and really couldn't be more simple than that. Next thing we do is disconnect the fuel hose. Now we're going to disconnect it this side of the fuel pump. Before anyone comments on my fuel flow filter, I am going to do a video on the benefits and concerns around fuel flow fuel filters in the engine bay. So happy for you to comment, but I choose to have mine there. I know a lot of people don't. So what I'm going to do here, I've got myself a rag because there's likely to be fuel coming out here. I have started this car in the last few days, so the fuel is primed, and I'm going to unscrew our fuel clip, not a Jubilee clip, proper fuel clip on this car. Now I've done these up really tight because if you don't, you will get fuel leakage. I've experienced it before, so I'm actually going to kind of take it out all the way, otherwise it doesn't open up very well. So there, I've got my screw out. Just going to use the flathead just to open it up a bit so I can move it away. And we just help try and move the clip around without damaging the pipe. Doesn't seem to want to come very easily. Ah, there we go, pipe's coming off anyway. Okay, wow, got away without any fuel spillage. What we are going to do to make this safe while we work on the car, because we do not want fuel coming out, won't come back down the fuel filter should be one way, but what we are going to do is put in a bolt and just do, it's a suitable size bolt for the kind of size of the fuel pipe. I think the fuel pipe is 6mm diameter if I remember rightly. Someone can tell me otherwise. So I've put a M6 bolt in there, and now we're just going to do it up tight, and this will just make sure that no fuel is just going to start spilling out of this hose at any point while we're removing the engine. And we haven't got any electrics here, we haven't, because we removed them all, we haven't got the engine on, so if you do get any fuel spillage and you are unable to catch it, it's worth washing down any area with some soapy warm water, being careful of the alternator or dynamo. You don't want to get that soaking wet. There we go. So that should be safe now. Well, we'll just pull the metal piping around a little bit to give us a little bit of room in there. You don't want to crush it, but that should be enough on the fuel line. So while we're in this area of the car, we're going to remove the throttle cable, which is here, and the choke cable, which is up here. These are easy to get to, and you might have slightly different ways of securing these, but the throttle cable here, I've got two kind of screw pins which are attached to that cable, and on the choke I've just got a little bolt and a little nut holding that together. Just need to loosen it off to be able to take that out. I'm also just going to take the air pipe off, because when we come to take the engine out, it helps to have every little bit of room. So we're just going to take that off, and the engine breather pipe, that just gives us a bit more space. I'll just put the trim back. So we're back with the flathead for the accelerator. There's one loose, two loose, very easy. I'm going to pull the cable out and also remove it. It's held in at the back of the tinware on the engine. Trim's coming down again. So you just need to unthread it from that. I'm just going to put these out the way. Put them safely into another box. Now the choke is 7 socket, so I'm just going to hold one side with a small pair of pliers and just loosen that code. Now you don't need to take the nut all the way, you just need it not to hold that cable in place, and then from the back you just pull that completely out of the carburetor. So now you've got both those cables completely out the way. So we're now getting towards the business end of taking the engine out. All we've got now is the actual mountings. We've got the rear cross member with the actual kind of engine support, and then we've got the bolts between the engine and gearbox. What we're going to do before we take off this rear cross member is the recommended approach. So we have our jack here, and we have an old breadboard. Now, whether you buy a breadboard specifically for this task, or whether you raid an old one from your kitchen, doesn't really matter. If you want something quite solid and quite big, I'm going to place it down on our jack, and we're going to jack this up, not on the mounting point where we normally jack the car. We're going to actually support the engine on the actual sump itself. So we're going to move this into position under the sump, and we're going to try and keep it nice and straight and nicely in the middle. You want to try and give it as much support as possible. Try and get it in as far as you can. We're going to do off our jack, and then we're going to start to move it up. You don't have to, you're not looking to lift the car here. You're literally just looking to support. Just trying to get it nice and even so it takes the support nicely. Just looking to support at this point in time. So there we are, not going to do it any further, don't want to start jacking up the car, but that's nice and solid, holding the sump in place. And now we can remove our rear cross member. To remove our rear cross member, first we're going to remove the mounting for the car onto the rear cross member. Now there's 2 bolts at the front here, and there's 2 nuts at the back here on threads that go into the engine block. What I like to do is just loosen these ones at the back first, give it a little bit of breathing space in order to then loosen the front ones. It just allows it to move around, stops it from any jerky reactions. So these are, I think these are 15s at the back, and these look like 13s at the front. These might be 17s at the back, but we'll check now. Yeah, so there's 17s at the back. So get a ratchet with a 17 on. I'm just not gonna crack it off a lot, just a little bit. And then we're going to tackle these 2 at the front. And they are 13s. So all the time when you're doing this, you just want to make sure you don't want the engine to drop. You just need to look out for any signs of danger or problems. See the weights coming off the cross member now by doing this. Just doing each in turn so they come up nicely. So it's nice and even. Feeling loose now, so that one's free. That one's still got a little bit. And there we go. So the engine's now free of that mounting, and now we can take the rear cross member off. Now the rear cross member is held on with 4 bolts. Trying to find my extender. Back in the box where it should be. So it's held in by 4 nuts. 2 are in this side, just where it meets here, and 2 are exactly the same on the other side, just behind here. Now they can be a little bit fiddly to get to, especially on this side with the exhaust and stuff. But there are little notches cut out which allow you to get an extender in, which just can help a little bit. So you want a 13 mil, and what we're going to do is not take them off entirely at this point, just get them to the very end, because again you're trying to restrict the the ability for the cross member to just fall off. Still got a lot of the wires and stuff in the way a little bit here, but you can work around them. Okay, so I'm just going to wind that back on a little bit. I'll do the bottom one. So I'm just going to leave those slightly on while I go over the other side. So you can hear there's less room here, it's quite restricted. First one nearly out, we're going to do the bottom one, which is even more tricky. Just not a lot of room for the ratchet, basically, to do its thing. It's a bit too small to get a hand screwdriver in. Okay, so this is just coming off now. So take these two off fully. And we'll take these off fully. Just holding it in place well, because you don't want it to fall. And then we should be able to just pull this out. Ooh, there you go, the engine just dropped a little bit. Just going to lift it up a little bit to help it. Realised the spring is actually stopping it from coming off entirely, so we're just going to push it back on a second. We're just going to take these bolts all the way up. I didn't think they actually needed to come all the way up, but it appears they do. So we've taken that bracket off entirely now. And just complete the other side. Whoa, there we go. So that's the spring and mounting off. And this just comes away really easily after that. So here you can see we've got our engine balanced our breadboard. All we've got should have is the gearbox engine mountings holding this in place now. We just, before we do anything else, we're just going to run through our checklist, make sure we've covered everything. So hopefully you can see most of this. So we're going to go Did we disconnect the battery? Yes. Did we remove the bumper and chrome? Yes. Did we disconnect the electrics? Yes, and we took pictures. Did we remove the starter? Yes, we did. Did we disconnect the hoses? Yes. Let's move this up slightly. Did we disconnect the fuel lines and make safe? Yes, we did. Did we disconnect the throttle and choke? Yes. Remove the rear mount, which we've now done. We were trying to leave it in place, but turns out can't. And the cross member, and we used a jack to support the engine. We've removed the exhaust shield and undercar tinware, including the flywheel shield, which we have added there. So all we need to do now is remove the gearbox bolts, just look around the engine, make sure there's nothing else attached anywhere, and then we should be able to bring her out. Now when we remove the gearbox bolts, and I showed you where they were on a gearbox earlier, the engine shouldn't just fall out, because the couple of the mountings are actually kind of threads within the block itself, so they're still within between the gearbox and the engine. So when we actually pull the engine out, we have to pull it out kind of backwards slightly in order to disengage those. So now we've got our list pretty much done. It's just removing the gearbox bolts and then bringing the engine out. The bolt we're going to remove is actually under the engine on this side, so we need to go back under the car, so just going to do that quickly. I believe it's a 13, so we've got our 13 socket. Just going to go under the car and take it out. So that's the bolt out of there. Now we've just got 3 left in the back of the engine. So final thing we need to do before we take the engine out is the top 3 bolts. Two are bolts, sorry. One is a nut on that side. Again, I'll put in the picture of the gearbox so I show you which ones I'm doing. But literally we just need to undo those, and we're good to take the engine out. So let's do that. There you go, got that one. So just a bolt like that. Hopefully you can see that. That's on this side. We'll do the next one. Takes a bit of feeling to make sure you're in the right place. And again, that's the same type. And then finally we've got the one on that side, which is the nut. Coming now. We've got it. Okay, here we go. So just a nut on that side. The engine is now free from the gearbox, and we can pull it out. So next thing I need to do is get my helper, and we can take the engine out. So what we've got here is set up, ready. We've got some bricks that I've just recently bought. They're like 65p each, so not a great deal of money. There's 4 of them on each side. And as we bring the engine back and out, what we're going to try and do is lower the breadboard onto these bricks so that we can remove the jack and wheel it away, and and this makes sure that we don't have to put the engine on the ground or anything like that. We can do that, I've done that many times before, but then you have to lift it back up onto an unstable breadboard that's sitting on a jack in order to get it back in the car. So my theory is here, and I've not done this before, but my theory is here that if I bring it back, put the breadboard on the stands, then I can lower the jack, wheel it away, and then when I come to refit, all I need to do is pull the jack back in under the breadboard, jack it up off the bricks, and move it forward and into position. Also with these bricks, I mean, the engine weighs probably around 60-70 kilos, and it's quite an awkward shape. So whilst it might not be beyond some of you to lift it single-handedly, it's probably beyond me, and so having a helper is quite useful. But I think with this method, with the bricks, I could probably just about do it single-handedly. But I'm going to get helpers anyway, because I don't want to mess this up. You know, you're talking about a couple of £1,000 for an engine, so you want to make sure that you take care of it. So I'm going to go get the helper and then try and get it onto these bricks. So we're going to try and break the connection between the engine and the gearbox. I think I'm just going to lower it a little first. So just going to break the connection just slightly, lay it down a little bit. And then wiggle it slightly, it should come apart, and there it is. Just going to catch my starter motor, which has dropped a little bit, but right, that should be good. Yeah, so we're going to which way?
That way, otherwise it won't clear.
No room that way. So what we're going to do is drop it down a bit further. What? It's bending now slightly, is it? Oh, what was that? Coming off the breadboard slightly. So we're going to pull it towards us. Try and manoeuvre it back onto the breadboard. Okay, let's get it on the middle of the breadboard. Okay, it's not looking too bad, so we can pull it this way a little bit. Right, we'll move it. Just try and straighten it up first. We need to give it a bit more lift. And we can put our bricks. Actually, no, I want to come further back because I want to be able to access inside the engine. Right, just hold it there a second. I want to make sure I can get the jack out. Don't want it too tight. I want a nice stable base on it. I'm just going to come around the other side. Ooh, hello. Just about looks central, so we're just going to carefully lower it down. Coming. Done? Mm-hmm. There we go. So now I can wheel this out the way carefully, and there, our engine on a nice stand, all looking good. Check for any problems or damage. There doesn't seem to be any, so all looks good. And that's how you get the engine out on a Fiat 500.